Humans are multicellular organisms. The development of multicellular organisms begins with the fertilization and followed by subsequent cell differentiations, cell proliferations, cell divisions, etc. The integration of these developmental processes and also the coordination of physiological processes such as metabolism and reproduction are all dependent on chemical messengers. Now, endocrinology is a discipline that's concerned with the study of this group of chemical messengers, such as hormones. Now, hormones are produced by the endocrine glands and some cells that regulate the activity of many other cells in the body. Apart from the physiological roles of hormones, scientists are also interested in studying the biosynthesis, chemical properties, and also storage of hormones. They are also interested to study their secretions, how they act, the mechanisms of those hormones. And in the end of the day, they wish to design some strategies to treat, to diagnose those endocrine disorders. Now, in the following 3 episodes, I have invited Professor K.M. Chan from the School of Life Sciences of the CHK to talk about hormonal actions and their functions in the endocrine systems. Welcome to the program, Professor Chan. As we know, glucose is a very important energy source for human cells, and also it provides carbon atoms for the synthesis of many complex molecules such as fatty acids and carbohydrates. Because many students find it very difficult to conceptualize those very complicated metabolic pathways. So before we talk about glucose, would you please give us an overview of those complicated metabolic pathways, particularly regarding the sugars?
Patrick, it's not that complicated. Actually, we all need one 6-carbon sugar known as glucose. And glucose metabolism is controlled by mainly insulin and a few other hormones like glucagon and thyroid hormones. I have prepared some slides for you in this video. This video is about the hormonal control of metabolism. Hope students studying metabolism, food and nutrition, physiology, endocrinology, and they will find it useful. I will explain what we have known and introduce to you what we are studying at the end. If you're interested in this topic, please join me to understand how our hormones control sugar metabolism. And at the end, join us the task of reviewing how some new peptide hormones can modulate sugar metabolism too. First, let's review some basic concepts of metabolism. We all need glucose to survive. Glucose is a 6-carbon sugar we use in glycolysis to produce high-energy compounds in the TCA cycle. And finally, for ATP production at the end here. If we do not need that much energy, we store this glucose in glycogen. There are also crosstalks with amino acid metabolism and fat metabolism from some amino acids and acetyl-CoA linking to pyruvate, which is a free carbon compound, and we can make glucose from there.
So now we know the glucose could be found in the blood, and then its level has to be maintained in a very, very narrow range. Otherwise, some diseases could happen, such as diabetes or hypoglycemia. So how is this narrow range is maintained, with the effect of hormones?
Yes, this is a very important question. We usually use the blood glucose level as a hallmark to learn how different hormones control glucose metabolism. First, we digest our foods and break down carbohydrates or sugars to make glucose available in our body. Blood circulation moves glucose around from the gut. When it goes to the liver, insulin could facilitate glucose to store as glycogen. However, when we need glucose, epinephrine and glucagon could convert glycogen back to glucose. Cortisol, epinephrine, and growth hormone will convert glutamine to glucose, in the kidney and facilitate the breakdown of lipid or lipolysis to produce energy. So, which organ do you think is the most important one in controlling glucose metabolism?
Like because you mentioned about the glucose and which could be stored in the liver. So among the internal organs like the liver, kidney, spleen, I will pick up the liver one because this seems to be the biggest one. Am I correct?
Close. Our liver is the most important organ for hormonal control and glucose metabolism. But if you look at your body, which part of the body is huge enough to suck up all the sugars?
They would be difficult to say because obviously the liver compared to the spleen, kidney, this is the biggest. So which one could you give us some hint?
Well, people never consider this as an organ. But if you consider your whole body, your arms, thigh, legs, and this is the largest part of your body. And also when you do exercise, so muscle is the most important organ to suck up all the glucose or sugars in your body.
That means the overall with sum of all the tissues that will become, the muscle will become the biggest organ.
Exactly. To answer this question, which part of the body is huge enough to suck up the sugars? It must be your muscle. And especially when you do exercise, you need energy and glucagon from pancreas. Epinephrine from the adrenal gland will be pumped out and go to the liver for glucose release. Of course, when fasting or when your glucose level is low, these two hormones will do the same thing to facilitate glucose production from glycogen breaking down. Finally, muscle with protein could also be broken down to produce glucose, and the Cori cycle will move lactate from pyruvate from glycolysis to the liver for gluconeogenesis. In summary, we only get insulin, one hormone, to stimulate an anabolic process, facilitate glucose uptake and metabolism. Of course, higher insulin level will end up stimulate glycogen and protein synthesis. It also inhibits all catabolic processes such as glycogenolysis, gluconeogenesis, and fatty acid breakdown. However, starvation could stimulate several hormones to promote glucose production from glycogen, glycogenolysis, from protein with gluconeogenesis, and from fatty acids to generate energy.
Professor Chen, you mentioned several hormones like insulin, epinephrine, and cortisol. I suppose those are very important in the regulation of blood glucose, right? So how is the release of those hormones like insulin is induced? Because the insulin is, I guess it should be response to the change of glucose in the blood. How is it induced actually? And also how does it work in the cellular level?
Yes, the tipping point is in the pancreas. The beta cell from the pancreas sends the glucose level to produce insulin. High glucose in the blood can stimulate the production and release of insulin from the beta cells of the pancreas in our body. GLUT2 is a glucose transporter to facilitate glucose uptake in the pancreas. The ATP energy will stop the potassium channel in the cell membrane to cause depolarization. Hence, calcium ions will move in to promote the release of insulin. Of course, high cellular glucose level could also directly stimulate the transcription and expression of the insulin gene to produce more insulin. The actions of insulin are to facilitate glucose uptake in different tissues and organs. After a big meal or a sugar-rich meal, insulin from the pancreas will go to various organs to stimulate glucose uptake. And in the liver, glucose will be stored as glycogen or converted to triacylglycerol for lipid metabolism and storage in adipose tissue with low-density lipoproteins. Glucose in the liver could also be delivered to the muscle and brain for regular use.
So it seems like the insulins act to lower the blood glucose by stimulating the anabolic reactions, making it storing as a glycogen. So I know that there's another group of hormones like the glucagon and also thyroid hormones. They seem to be working on a completely different actions on the cells. So would you please let us know how do they work in comparison to the insulin?
Yes, there are two other hormones very important in controlling glucose metabolism. To counteract the effects of insulin, glucagon is also released from the pancreas for glucose production when we need more glucose or even amino acids in our muscle and the brain. Glucagon going to the adipose tissue can promote lipolysis, and the free fatty acids and glycerol will come back to the liver for more glucose and amino acids production. One key hormone recently is of our major concern with its role in glucose metabolism, and this is the thyroid hormone, which controls our body metabolism or metabolic rate. From patients with thyroid diseases, we learned that the thyroid hormone acts on pancreas, muscle, adipose tissue, and liver to generate and release glucose. Thyroid hormone is produced by the thyroid gland controlled by TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, from the pituitary gland. Feedback mechanism with excessive amount of thyroid hormone can go to the hypothalamus and pituitary gland to depress further release of TSH and thyrotropin releasing hormone TRH from the hypothalamus. Thyroid hormone or T3 facilitates gluconeogenesis and PCK production. Prolonged effects of T3 or in hyperthyroidism can cause islet cells become malfunction.
Professor Chan, in the very beginning, you mentioned that insulin is a peptide hormone. Okay, in fact, in 1953, Sanger worked out the amino acid sequence of that hormone, and he was later awarded a Nobel Prize, as I know. And since the 1950s, a lot of research work on endocrinology have been made, major discoveries also. So would you tell us more about the latest research, particularly referring to the sugar metabolism, some interesting work?
Yes, exactly. There are three hormones, insulin, glucagon, and thyroid hormone. They've been studied for more than half a century, and more new discoveries now been found in other small peptides in controlling glucose metabolism. Recently, we are also concerned with the effects of other hormones from the gut to control glucose metabolism. These hormones, like leptin and ghrelin, can affect our appetite and food intakes. Ongoing research are studying these gut hormones, including somatostatin, YY peptide or neuropeptide Y, glucagon-like peptide 1, and CCK, cholecystokinin, on glucose metabolism. Hopefully, drugs can be developed to fine-tune the effects of these hormones for better sugar management in our body. If you're interested in this topic, please read these two papers and write a review on how gut hormones affect glucose metabolism in our body.
In this episode, Professor Chan has introduced some important hormones such as insulin, glucagon, and thyroid hormones. However, glucose is just one type of the energy-rich source. There are also many other molecules such as fatty acids. So in the next episode, I will talk with Professor Chan to introduce some other molecules such as fatty acids, also their metabolism in the human body.